What's up, sons? It's Blind Red with Son of a Tech. Once again, today joining me is Clark Vaccaro with Basic. He basically, right? There you go. No. He basically does some lobbying, essentially, for cryptocurrency mining, and specifically has a lot of experience surrounding the New York moratorium, from my understanding. So go ahead and introduce yourself and let us know where we can find you.
So my name is Clark Vaccaro. I'm with BASIC, the Blockchain Security Industry Coalition, where I am the president. We're a young organization founded a few months ago, less than half a year ago, mostly in the wake of the passage of the Kellis Parker is what it's known as. It's a behind the meter energy use proof of work mining moratorium, and the reason why we started there is because we realized this isn't just a New York issue, right? New York is a bellwether state, so basically, whatever happens, if New York decides to, on a state level, make moves against mining like this, other states are going to say, oh, look, that's model policy. So this is a
Not dissimilar from what California would be a bell state then too, for an example.
Yeah,
like they influence each other or the rest of the states on policy.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
So we're just basically trying to, the way we see it, kind of like plug the dam, hold back this regulatory avalanche, right? And it's basically what we do is we communicate directly with politicians and we explain to them, try to educate them on, tell them, in fact, this technology, this new, scary new technology is not wasteful. It's not destroying the planet. In fact, many of the knock-on effects of mining can actually be used to save the planet. And I mean, we'll get into that in this discussion. But there's a whole bunch of ways that mining could bring us forwards on these environmental issues. But it's a tricky thing to explain.
I know with your policy director, we'll be having a huge deep dive into environmental as well. I did want to ask one question, just kind of out of curiosity. From my observation, when I look at, you talk about like the Bell State thing and how New York and kind of like California influence policy across the rest of the states. Have you noticed a shift in that recently? Because it appears that something I've noticed is like it seems like Texas and Florida, for example, are kind of pushing back, right, to where they're not really following the same patterns that we used to see.
Well, I mean, I guess the way I see it is, I'm not necessarily a really political guy, but I think what it does come down to a lot of the time is basically red states and blue states, right? So it's like if New York, who's pushing this, it's a lot of Democrats, specifically progressive Democrats, and I think that if there are political zeitgeists on both the left and the right, and I think that I think that progressives around the country would look at what happened in New York and say, like, this is the cutting edge of progressive policy.
Right.
We need to emulate this, right?
Okay.
Whereas it's a completely different discourse going on with Texas or Florida, where a lot of the time they'll see something like New York like banning new technology, shutting the door on a nascent industry, and they'll be like, these people are fools. Come move over here, right? So there is definitely there's stuff going on there, but basically what you're seeing is you're seeing a lot of times like a reaction, like a response on the part of these red states saying like, okay, these guys want to ban it, like hey, come move over here.
Right. So they're a little more reactionary.
Well, I think they're playing their cards right. It's like down here in Texas, right? Like I've seen an incredible, like thriving, sort of like political blockchain advocacy ecosystem that just sprung up in the course of the last few years and is really making waves.
I mean, even
Blockchain Council and so many others, and it's it's very encouraging to see. So while New York is probably gonna take a while to get there, I hope that places like Florida and Texas can show that we're open for business, and most importantly, welcoming innovation, right? Welcoming in these young industries, right? I mean,
so when you talk about like New York and blue states as it pertains to like cryptocurrency mining in particular, the biggest pushback is in the blue states, you would say?
Unfortunately, that's what we're looking at right now. And it's really wild to me. Sorry to cut you off, but
No,
like,
perfect.
it's what's so interesting to me, right, is the reason why, I mean, you have huge amounts of money being dumped in through the sort of like nonprofit, like NGO, environmentalist, industrial complex in terms of lobbying a lot of these progressive politicians. You've got a lot of media also in lockstep with that. But I just feel like that is so totally wrong-headed, because what a lot of these people, what they're
seems antithetical to what you would think the Liberal Party would support.
No, exactly. Right? Well, because what these people, what you'll often hear them say is, "Oh, it's wasteful," right? Like this is a waste of energy,
right?
Or it's destroying the
individual
planet, right?
sovereignty and financial freedom, and empowering the poor people to basically have access to financial services that other people do not is a waste of energy.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
That's,
I think you could call it economic justice.
Right.
And in fact, but it depends on your perspective. But really, even if you want to look specifically at the green issues, right? Because that's what we hear again and again and again and again. And when I'm up in Albany, knocking on the doors of, assembly people, state senators, I see the memos because they have this little box outside their door, and it was just stuffed to the brim. Memo from the Sierra Club, memo from the, all these really wild stuff. Like the opposition is working overtime to try to convince a lot of these politicians that this is going to destroy the planet. It's going to
right.
Ruin New York State, whatever. But in fact, if you look at let's just talk about EVs, right? Because that is a big in New York. That is a big thing that people want to see. They want to produce less carbon, right? Build out a green grid that supports so we can pivot towards like EVs instead of gas-powered cars, right? Or just in general reduce carbon emissions, right? Like that's a big one. How on earth are we going to, a state like New York, right? That's like encumbered by bureaucracy and takes like a million years to do anything when it comes to building infrastructure, and it's all incredibly expensive. Like there are people there who are willing to come to the table right now and build out, a lot of times even for free or heavily discounted, that very green grid that they're asking about.
Right.
But yet these people are the ones who are being demonized. Who are they? They're miners.
Right.
Right? What's the other way it's going to be done? It's going to be offloaded onto the taxpayer through inflation or something like that, or it's going to be people like miners who build this infrastructure out, because no one's willing to come and do it.
Exactly. So the incentives have to be structured in a position, right, to where the miners are incentivized to utilize more green energy sources. So that could be a policy, sure. But when we get down to it, how are you going to pay for all of the infrastructure to support all of the electric vehicles or EVs in the future, which is clear is not working already in California, and we're not even at an adoption rate that's near majority, right? It's not like 80% of the vehicles in California are EVs yet.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what the number is exactly, but they're already having issues with that. So you need something to come in, and it has to, a lot of people would say it has to be some sort of industry that's going to back that and push that, right? I mean, that's one of the things that I bring up about in Texas a lot, right? So here in Texas, we have a very interesting grid where it is detached from the rest of the nation. Very unique, right? It's not something that's the same, pretty much the only state, right? It's that way, at least from my knowledge.
Yeah.
So, but a while back, we had the winter storms that shut everything down because it was unexpected winter storms, and they didn't winterize all of the wind turbines and some other stuff that went down there. And that infrastructure needed to be updated, and you needed money to update the infrastructure, get the winterizing in, and all that sort of stuff. From my knowledge, a lot of that money for infrastructure came from the Bitcoin mining. That's why you see a lot of the local politicians currently, the ones that do support mining, support it pretty heavily, right? Because it's helped build up the infrastructure in Texas, right? So I think you bring up a very good point, that miners do build that infrastructure.
And just help the grid in so many ways, right? Like little things, whether it's like the demand response, like the ability to shut on and off at a moment's notice, unlike basically any other industry. The ability to, what is it? Prevent brownouts, right? Stabilize the grid, right? Like there's so much to talk about when it comes to that stuff.
If you did proof of work versus proof of stake, like you're talking about the ability to turn off and turn back on. If you're doing proof of stake, you're running in a data center that is like basically the business model is never shut off.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So there's a huge difference between the two, right? Whereas like the Bitcoin mining, you can be incentivized to shut off, but if you shut down a data center, that's not going to fly.
Yeah. No.
Ever.
Exactly. It really is unique, among all of the industries. I mean, I'm having a hard time thinking of anyone else who could just basically stop operations on a dime and start them back up again same day.
Right.
Like that's
and dependent specifically on the needs of the society too, right?
Exactly.
Which is crazy. Yeah, like that's absolutely cool.
Yeah. You mentioned something earlier about energy sources, right? Like I just want to go back to that and the regulation stuff. First of all, when it comes to the New York mining moratorium, Assemblywoman Anna Kellis, who's the bill sponsor and has been the one who's been really pushing for it most aggressively, her and Kevin Parker from Brooklyn, what she says on the record again and again and again is she basically says this is an incremental thing. Right now the moratorium is specifically targeting behind the meter energy.
Right.
Proof of work miners in New York State, but the way that they're targeting out one specific industry, it's the only industry that's been targeted like this in this exact way, singled out like that, is fracking. But that's not what we're seeing right now with the current moratorium bill is not what they want. Like Anna Kellis says, it's a waste of energy even if hydro is being used, even if solar or wind is being used. Really, we shouldn't be doing any of this at all because it's a wasteful practice. Think of what else that energy could be being used for. So, when it comes to like a lot of the discourse in somewhere like Albany about what is green and what isn't, these people don't think flare gas is green. These people don't realize that there's all this excess methane, for instance. Yeah, exactly. Right. All this excess methane that miners can use, right? And people are always complaining about, methane, we need to stop eating beef, right? It's like, here are people who can do something about that methane and turn it into something valuable. Right. But it's like, so what I find is it's just like, the idea of hydro, this, that, and the other. I mean, it's like New York is trying to push away or at least the politicians that are behind this in New York. And it's not all of New York, right? You have people like Assemblyman Clyde Vannell and State Senator James Sanders from Queens, who are absolute legends and are pushing really hard, in favor of this, this infrastructure creation. But what's going to happen here is, what Kellis wants is to push all mining out of the state, which is ultimately less green because they're going to go to, another state or another country where, unlike New York, it isn't so hooked up into the hydro system, right? New York, mining in New York specifically is disproportionately hydro, like hugely disproportionately hydro. Yeah. So it's like they're actually making the world less green and producing more emissions by saying, you can go over to some other state. But it's just it's ridiculous. It's completely they're their own worst enemies.
So that's the question I have because it's confusing. So do you think that do you think it's a completely genuine, we think this is bad for the environment and they have bad data points, or do you think that there's another agenda behind that? Because that's confusing.
I mean, I don't know exactly what the players are here, but I think that, there are true believers. They're
just like anything else.
Yeah, they're
good intentions.
Road to hell, paved with them. Yeah. But there are zealots who consider themselves environmentalists and think they're saving the planet. And there are what do you call it? People who, I don't want to say that they have ties to, necessarily like traditional finance or some of these big shadowy, global nonprofit type or NGO type orgs, but it's like, there are definitely.
But New York State would be a place where a lot of that exists.
I mean, this is a full spectrum attack, right? Like there are clearly people who are at the very top who are pushing and disseminating a lot of these talking points, whether it's that these are people who are basically shilling for more traditional financial institutions and, trying to save their own skin, or, there's some other agenda, they're afraid of new technology, they're afraid of decentralization. I think that those are all, big components that are here. But when it comes to the average, foot soldier fighting this stuff, I think it's, they just are inundated with these like false environmentalist talking points. Talking about mining is going to destroy the planet, plus just sort of this like this general kind of, it really does come down to being a political thing. It's like, oh, like you hear the discourse in like New York City political circles, progressive political circles, and it's like, oh, these crypto bros, like, like it's just like, crypto, you know what I mean? But it's like, if those alleged progressives could spend, even a tiny fraction of that energy deriding, some of the, much bigger, much more polluting, actual, giant, banking institutions, or even like literal mining institutions in the world, that would be great. But there's just this disproportionate ire directed and distaste for the the crypto crowd, the mining crowd, as well as just sort of like a lot of like crazy talking points being fed. So I'd say it's everything. It's the it's the big people up top, and it's just like people, genuine true believers.
So you would say, by and large, if you're going to look at policy as it pertains to mining, if we're going, it does appear to be a partisan issue at this point?
I think that there are a lot of people who are trying to make it.
Okay.
But as I was saying, Clyde Vanell, State Senator James Sanders, Todd Kaminsky, what's his face, Senator Jeremy Cooney. These are all Democrats in New York State who have been very, very strong allies of ours in beating back a Kellis Parker bill. And so what you actually see is it was a 20-something to 30-something split in the New York State Senate, which is very rare. Usually, well, all the Republicans voted nay on Kellis, but the Democrats were split, which never, ever happens in the state Senate. So this is actually, I think that there are a lot of people who very much want this to be an issue that divides neatly along partisan lines, but there are a lot of Democrats, even in a state like New York, who understand, someone like Clyde Vanell, he's from Cambria Heights, Queens. He's like, this is something that has tremendous economic transformative power. This is something that'll, bring jobs to my community where I grew up, you know what I mean?
Well,
so,
not only that, if you look at it from the perspective of like Occupy Wall Street, that was a very, like, party line kind of protest. I thought I heard one, I forget what it was on, maybe it was like a Joe Rogan podcast or something like that. I forgot who it was, but he was talking about kind of the idea where Occupy Wall Street was that breaking point to where they started splitting it more, because it was basically, the idea was, we are the 99%, right, against the banking industry, right? And they're like, no, that's not going to work. Let's split you guys up along. Like, let's find whatever it is, right? Whether it's race or religion or whatever policy we can, or thing that we can find to break that 99% up, so they're not as strong against us, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, just broadly, more politically, I think that if you look at what was going on back then compared to a lot of the places we are now, like a lot of discourse of people who say, oh, we're fighting for the little guy. Those very same people are now basically engaging in apologia for some of the biggest and most powerful institutions in the world, right? So a lot can change in 20, 10 years, something like that. Yeah,
I've noticed that as well. Yeah, where you're like, when there have been a segment of the population that it appears have turned into the bad guys without actually realizing that they've turned into the bad guys, right?
Yeah, well, that's a very hard thing to realize about yourself.
Yeah. And we all do it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why I was asking, do you think it's based on data points or not? Because I think by and large, it appears that if you present somebody with the data points, and specifically as it pertains to cryptocurrency mining, especially with like moving towards renewables and solidifying the grid and supporting it or whatever, that when you bring those up, those are by and large kind of ignored.
Yeah.
It's all about just the overall number. right? The overall power consumption number.
Yeah.
And that's the arguing point without the actual nuance added in.
And I mean, that's its own whole kind of, politicized rabbit hole, right? Is the thing is energy consumption, is power use by definition a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
And
Well,
obviously,
and if you bring up the banking industry and credit card transactions, et cetera, no, that's not even considered, right? So.
Well, it's a given. It's taken for granted, exactly.
Right.
But I think that, again, this is blockchain infrastructure specifically, like this is something that's nascent. This is something that's new. I think that, politics is a legacy industry. Like I've heard it said multiple times, mining and politics, it's like oil and water, right? You got a bunch of, cowboys over here, right? People who, move fast, really innovative thinkers outside the box. And then you have like politics, especially in a state like New York, which is super, beholden to like huge entrenched interests, political machines, it's all very sort of dues paying based. It's like, oh, I know you, you've been around, or, sucking up to people for 10 years. Like that's how you move ahead. You don't move ahead because you come up with some brilliant, innovative idea. In fact, you get kicked out for something like that far too often. So, but that's why, but that's why education is so important, right? Is because there's this barrier between worlds, right? The information that a lot of these politicians are getting is so far off the mark that all it takes is someone like me, someone like Dennis, to come and talk to them and say, actually, here's the way that we're helping, not hurting.
Yeah. Is there a place where, like, if somebody watching or I could like find access to that information that you provide to the politicians as well?
Ooh, I was thinking we young work, but I think we will be posting some talking points on the website soon.
Okay.
We have a bunch of them. I think one of my favorite things that I did when I was in Albany is I brought my buddy, who is a miner, who's based out of he was based out of China. China kicked all the miners out, and he was moving, huge, amounts of GPUs. He's a GPU miner over from China to Plattsburgh and relocating his facility to Plattsburgh. And here I physically brought him with me to Albany, and I went to these politicians and I was like, look, when is the last time that you've heard of someone? When's the last time that you heard of jobs coming from China to Plattsburgh? In 2022? Like, are you kidding me? Like, maybe you'll go the other direction, but that's something you don't see every day.
That is
right. Like, this is someone who is bringing jobs in, who reactivated an old mothballed dam, who's giving back to the community, who's providing heat to local businesses, building out infrastructure, and he talked to them, have a conversation. I think that really a lot of these people just have to have it explained to them. They have to be shown. We need to engage. We need to organize and engage. And miners need to, as painstaking as it can sometimes be, come to the table and talk to not just politicians who are friendly to the issues, but people who are unfriendly. Because I feel like a lot of them just, they're just being given bunk information. Politician, it's a busy job. You've got to balance a million issues. This is one of hundreds of bills that you're thinking about, right? So. You got to give them a little friendly nudge and be like, hey, look, we're doing this, and this. Here's the actual tangible ways that we've helped this community. Yeah.
Well, once you get, I'll put the website information down in the description below for everyone for sure, so they can check that out. Now, you primarily work in the state of New York, but I did want to get your insight, maybe if you have any at the federal level with some of the policies that have been coming through here recently, or at least. We've had we had some kind of announcements of them wanting to ban cryptocurrency mining at the federal level, and then of course we had the the Digital Act here recently that is not fully passed. Maybe you can update me on that, but had some very concerning things in it surrounding central bank digital currencies and that sort of thing. So. How familiar are you with that?
Fairly familiar,
Okay.
But I'm not currently too focused on federal level stuff.
Okay.
What I'm envisioning is going to happen, is a cascading wave of state and possibly even local level legislation. Okay. I think that a lot of noise is made on the federal level, and people say, "Oh, yeah, I'll do an executive order on this, I'll do that," and da da da. But things are, things don't really change that much or that quickly there. Again, states I think are going to be the where most of this regulatory battle ends up playing out.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, no.
So you don't find any of that concerning? Like you?
Oh, I
is
find
there
it.
a possibility
Oh, I find it
there?
concerning. I mean,
Okay.
it doesn't keep me up at night in the same way that statewide sort of
does.
one by one regulatory sweep would.
Right.
But
Well, that's why
I mean,
always say
there's a
environment
lot of people
Texas.
gunning for us.
Yeah.
Rest assured, like, we got enemies on all sides.
Yeah. That's why I always say I'm kind of glad I'm in Texas because, like, worst case, it seems like I'm a little buffered from the cryptocurrency portion here, especially with they're talking about like modifying the state constitution to, basically prevent anybody from taking the rights away to hold digital currencies, that sort of thing. That's kind of cool. That's neat. I don't know how much that actually impacts or prevents the federal government from doing anything. It's very similar to, I guess, like the marijuana issue, where like for a while it was kind of like, yeah, but it's still illegal on the federal level, so we'll just send federal agents to go get them or whatever it is, right?
It is like the marijuana issue, except one thing a lot of people don't take into account. Growing cannabis takes a lot more energy, much more energy intensive than mining.
Well, there's been those two have been working together too in some cases.
Oh
right?
yeah, I've seen a lot of really
cool.
interesting like little
Yeah.
little intersections with there. Yeah, no, again, two nascent industries,
Right.
reviled by some, but
Yeah.
there's a tremendous development potential there. Job potential, all sorts of stuff. And I mean, I'm just curious, what do you think about Texas? What is it about Texas, the Texas state spirit, perhaps, or the culture here? I don't know. What is it that makes you guys such a haven for?
I think the number one thing is being its own power grid, and I'll tell you why. This is actually because there's been multiple discussions over the past like century, right, in Texas to connect the grid to the rest. And the primary reason why Texas did not want to do that is it wanted to maintain its sovereignty in case it needed to move away from the United States in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
Initially, right? As far as like Texas is a republic, they consider themselves to have the ability to basically secede if they want to. It's kind of like a culture thing built into Texas. Texas, as citizens, right, kind of have this attitude that it's state loyalty over federal loyalty to a certain extent, right? Yes, they're very proud Americans. There's a ton of military here, all that sort of stuff. But I think that mindset,
Trying to keep in charge, keep their own energy in-house.
right?
Yeah.
Kept the power grid separate, and I think even when it moved like further on, I think in the 70s was the last one. I did a whole video on it. It's been a while, but I'll leave it linked down below. But in the 70s, it got like brought up again to reconnect, and they're like, no, we're not going to do it. We want to make sure that we have our own kind of infrastructure. And I think that gives Texas a unique ability for Bitcoin mining in particular, or crypto mining in particular, to help bolster the power grid, right? As well as build up the infrastructure, and they don't have to worry about like any other state having influence over that, right?
So it's just a good fit,
Right.
Yeah.
It's just, and I think, like I said, that's over the whole past century. So I think it's just like, it's almost as if Texas was structured in a particular manner right at its inception, essentially, to be kind of friendly towards Bitcoin mining in the States, right? So obviously there's other places that are going to be better from an environmental standpoint, right? Texas is very hot. In the summer, what we saw is, and if you look at the Bitcoin hash rate, you can definitely see the impact that had on the hash rate, right? We're starting to come back up as the temperatures cool off.
Yeah.
So I would say the biggest con in Texas for like mining would be probably the heat.
Yeah.
In general, but there's ways to handle that. It's going to be interesting to see how people handle it, right? Bitmain with the kind of the water cooling. There's a lot of immersion coming into Texas. That's been a big deal now, right? So, but I think that's just the spirit of Texans in general, right? So when you ask like, why is it Bitcoin, like Texans are generally more towards the libertarian scale, I think, in general. You got this power grid, unique power grid situation, and I think it just is a great fit, right? So,
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, I got to say, this has only been here twice. I actually got some family over here, but I love it here.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it's a beautiful place, super friendly people. Oh man, I wish I could stay a little longer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know, I'm just very pleasantly surprised to see again, specifically like, as I said, oil and water. You've got this Venn diagram where you have mining and politics, and it's a very narrow sliver in the middle. But I feel like that sliver is substantially larger here. I feel like we had Congressman Sessions was just in town to kick off this whole thing off a few nights ago. And it's right there, the fact that you've got someone like that who's comes and talk to us about how great we are. That's a very encouraging sign here. Yeah, no, so hopefully we can spread that to the rest of the states and all of North America. That's the dream.
That's an interesting perspective too, because what would you call, so earlier we had that discussion of like Bell states and like New York and California kind of influencing, I guess, liberal policy across the blue states. Is there a Bell state for red states that you think?
Ooh.
Because I'm not familiar with that. Would that be like a Florida, or would that be more of a Texas?
That's tricky.
Because I feel like
I don't know. Do you think Texas has that? There's been sort of like a trickle down.
Recent policy, I think that it feels like Florida was making a lot of the moves, like with DeSantis, and then Texas was copying Florida in a lot of areas, not in Bitcoin, but in like a lot of other areas, right? So I almost feel like Florida, to a certain extent, is that kind of Bell state for red states, but I don't know. That's kind of a question I had for you, because it was interesting now that we kind of
I'll have to think on that. That's interesting. That's interesting. I mean, I definitely think that Texas and Florida seem to be leading the way from over in New York. That's how it looks. But yeah, no, I think that.
What do you think of New Hampshire?
Very interesting.
The free state movement and all.
Yeah. No, I think. Well, I know that New Hampshire. I've met a lot of people who who have lots of great things to say about New Hampshire when it comes to, mining and all this stuff. So yeah, no, good stuff. I mean, I've been to New Hampshire a few times. It's a very interesting state politically, but I think that I think it's gonna be interesting to see how the mining discourse plays out there.
Because they still have high power costs, right? By and large.
More or less, yeah. I mean, but again, it's like people find ways to get sweetheart deals.
Right. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we'll get it wrapped up. Tell us where everybody can find you again.
Awesome. You can find us on Twitter. We're Blockchain Basic, BSIC, at Blockchain BSIC. Our website is Blockchain Basic, blockchainbasic.org, just the normal words, blockchainbasic.org. And you can find me on Instagram at DeFi Policy, DeFiPolicy. And want to give a quick message to all the politicians up in Albany and other people who might be thinking of pushing similar mining moratoriums. If you want to ban coal, okay? But do not single out and target one nascent industry. It's not your job to pick economic winners and losers, say this industry is good and that industry is bad. All right? Listen to your constituents. Or lest you go down in the books of history as someone who shut the door on something that was world-changing. How do you want to be remembered? And to anyone who's watching or listening who has been given any grief by local government, state-level government, or has anything that they'd like to bring to our attention, please, just you can send me a message on Twitter, Blockchain BSIC. I'd love to get in touch. Or if you live in a place where there's a really welcoming, local political scene, please let me know. I'd love to hear about it. And if you have any stuff that you think should be brought to our attention, we'll do our best to help out. We're a young organization, but we've been doing our best to doing our best to beat back the impending wave of regulation, and the battle's only beginning. We're in the process of opening our DC office, and yeah, no, this is going to be a very, very, very intense battle. It may last decades, but I think that if we organize as an industry, we can come out of this victorious.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for your time. Really
Thanks
appreciate
for having
it.
me. Yeah, coming on. Thanks for having me.
What do you like? I flip the interview there for 1 sec.
Thanks everybody for watching. Hit the like, comment, subscribe, and notification bells down below. I'll see you next Tuesday.
Take care.
I would also like to mention that you can check out exclusive content over on sonofatech.locals.com. Becoming a member is free, and if you would like access to specialized posts, there is a $5 supporter option that helps me support the channel and keep things running.